The Senate's practice of passing critical legislation in absolute secret without public debate. A staggering 94% of all Senate legislation is passed with no debate, no discussion at all of the policy or how your tax money is spent. Tonight, one leading senator is demanding that the government become somewhat accountable to American taxpayers. Imagine that. Lisa Sylvester with our report.
The bickering on Capitol Hill has reached new heights, and lawmakers' ratings have reached new lows. Senator Tom Coburn says bills are being approved by the Senate without debate, without amendments, and in 94% of the time without lawmakers formally voting on the legislation.
I think that fails the test of our founders' vision of a Senate. I think we will rue the day that we've gone down this path.
This week, Senator Coburn, a medical doctor and fiscal conservative, led a Republican revolt against an omnibus bill offered by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. That bill was full of popular measures, including increased money for unsolved civil rights crimes and for child pornography prosecutions. But it carried a price tag of more than $11 billion.
They vote against Americans with Lou Gehrig disease. They vote against American mothers who've suffered from postpartum depression. They vote against justice for people murdered during the civil rights struggle.
Many of those measures in the omnibus bill, Coburn says he actually supports. But the bill also included pork, money to build a museum in Poland, and to set up a Star-Spangled Banner Commission. And Coburn says when lawmakers are merely rubber-stamping legislation, that adds to the budget deficit.
This is $11.3 billion worth of additional spending at a time when American families are struggling to get by, that if we don't have the money, we're going to borrow it from their children and their grandchildren.
Coburn is still holding up more than 80 pieces of legislation until he says there's an open debate and amendment process. His stance has earned him the ire of Senator Reid and the title of Dr. No. Senator Coburn's office sent out a press release saying, quote, whether we like it or not, the federal government's long and bipartisan era of borrowing without limits and Enron-style accounting will come to an end. And Coburn added, it's time the U.S. government lives within its means, just as every American family does every day. Lou?
Well, every revolution begins with one man or woman, and it appears that this revolution is certainly at the point with Tom Coburn. I mean, what he's doing is, both in my judgment at least, clear-headed and courageous.
And many of his colleagues are actually praising him. I mean, he stood up and is basically saying, raising his hand and saying no more, that this process of unanimous consent has added to the budget deficit. We just had new projected figures of $482 billion. And he says at some point this has got to come to an end. And he says that point is now.
And let's hope that somewhere in the Senate he finds some colleagues with the courage to stand with him for the benefit of the country. It is also to be hoped, in addition to the fiscal responsibility involved here, Lisa, it would also be nice to think that those senators, and with that rather sanctimonious tone taken by the majority leader, Senator Harry Reid, that they would actually read the legislation as he intoned those very serious issues that some of the legislation dealt with. Any prospect of that occurring?
You know, that this is one of the big things that many people don't even realize, is that lawmakers frequently pass bills, and you've got pages and pages of bills, and they often don't actually read those bills.
And all we have to do to validate that reality is to look at the consequences of what passes for public policy these days. Thank you very much, Lisa Sylvester. The current Senate has passed, by the way, 855 bills in secret by so-called unanimous consent, which is simply a code expression for passing it without public debate or even a vote. To put that in perspective, the Senate passed only 53 measures by an actual roll call vote, and just 3 measures by voice vote. The 855 measures that your senators passed without your knowledge or debate or your input cost you more than $9 billion. Time now for our poll question. Do you believe the Senate should read more than 6% of the laws that they now pass? Yes or no? We'd like to hear from you. Cast your vote at LouDobbs.com. We'll have the results here later. Tonight's poll results, only 99% of you say the Senate should read more than the current 6% of the laws they now pass.